better roll them dice. You never know if it could change your life. Take a chance, you're neither wrong or right. You never know if you don't roll them dice. You better roll them dice. You never know.
Howdy, Rob.
Greetings, Matt, from the wind-borne aloft skies of Ophoi. Wind's greetings to you?
Yeah, wind's greetings to you, Rob. It's Dungeon Master of None.
I'm Rob.
I'm Matt, and we're here to talk about Zephyr, an anarchist role-playing game about feelings and anthropology and debt and state capture. It's about a lot of things.
It's about a lot of things. The full title and subtitle is Zephyr, an anarchist fantasy game of fleeting identities. This was written and illustrated by Federico Sons and has help from some other designers.
Lucretia Alves and Emily Pennyway.
Known to me from other projects, and are all of these people are involved in the indie RPG scene and have other titles and make cool, weird things.
Real listeners will know Federico Sons has actually been talked about on the podcast before, back when we did a review of the RPG Guide to Heists or whatever. The author wrote a chapter on that. But this is a work of pure auteurism
Yes.
in one sense, right? It is written and illustrated by the same person, and that's always really interesting to me. It's a Kickstarter packed indie RPG that has no dice and some really interesting mechanics, really interesting inspirations, a really interesting world. It's also a lot. It's a very complicated RPG. So where do you want to start with it?
I guess we'll just start at the beginning. I was trying to remember. I backed this Kickstarter not that long ago. It actually, I think, from beginning to completion, it was a very reasonable, I think, probably about a year. But I completely forgot what it was that made me interested in this. It's not just the word anarchist. Something else must have compelled me. But I was delighted by what we got. We'll just start at the beginning and go through it. Some of this is going to be incomplete for you listeners because this is a very visually striking and compelling book. The illustrations are beautiful. There are some delightful paintings, really, you would call them. There are a couple of comics that are not necessary to understand the system or the setting, but are designed to sort of like help with that. It is a very, very lovely book. And like Matt said, a work of artistic expression largely by one person. I'd say there's sort of like three things that you need to understand, like as a foundation before we can jump in. And
before we can even review this game.
Yes. Let's talk about Ophoi. Let's talk about the Wind Folk, and let's talk about our feelings after that.
Yeah,
but let's start with Ophoi and the Wind Folk. One of the core conceits, one of the key ideas here in this very adventurous fantasy game is that it takes place on the back of a sentient mobile landmass called Ophoi.
This continent was formed when the moon hit the ground. Part of character creation is going around the table or the narrative campfire and deciding what your character believes about the foundation of the world, and this has an effect. And then your character's journey through this continent that's made out of feelings, that also has feeling storms and feeling weather. And then your characters are also more or less condensed feelings. There's a lot of feelings.
There's a lot of
your
feelings.
Wind folk, your little meter and a half or meter tall people wearing wooden masks with glowing eyes like Jawas from Star Wars.
These guys make me think of what are they? Like the Koroks from the more recent Zelda games, or the little guys from Spirited Away, or just they're little, or is it Princess Mononoke? Anyway, little guys, little force guys with masks, except they're wind guys with masks, and there's some of them where one's made out of wood, some of them wear little seed pods, some of them wear other things. There's tons of illustrations of these little guys, and this is what you'll be, one of the wind folk.
And on this living continent, and being this wind folk is a set of societies or social obligations that is inspired by a lot of recent work on stateless people's anthropology. And so the main conflict of the setting is not only do you have to hunt and gather food that can become feelings in your body, but you're entwined with the natural world and with other wind folk through a set of obligations, which are kind of like character goals and actual quests that your group of players have to do. And this is all set in conflict with a set of people who are maybe not wind folk from the salt states who live their lives, doing agriculture and under debt and capitalism and violence and coercion. You want to get away from those people.
Yeah. So the feelings in question. So Ophoi, the continent, breathes out, and its breath, or both, is constituted of things that are both feelings, but also very real and can be gathered and shaped. And you are both a part of them, but also the world is made out of these various feelings. To understand what is being attempted by this game, and to really I think get what's neat and, to me, and I think to a lot of people, compelling about it, we have to talk about some books. We have to talk about Debt, the first 5,000 years. We have to talk about by David Graeber. We have to talk about James C. Scott's Seeing Like a State and a couple of other things. Fortunately for you listeners, Matt and I have read not every book on this list, but many of them.
Most of them.
Most of them. Between the two of us, we have pretty good coverage of this. And you're either sitting on the edge of your seat or rolling your eyes at this point. So just bear with us, because it is not as boring as it sounds. And I think it's actually, when we get to the end, I think I want to talk about why I think this is actually a really, really interesting way to approach a role-playing game. But before we can even talk about the game, we gotta talk a little bit about the foundations of play and the world that's being built here.
I mean, one of the things I'd really like to see from an indie RPG is doing something that is so out there and so different than other things that I have seen before. The problem is that at least I, as a critic, lack the language to quickly and in shorthand describe it in a fast way, where I can't be oh, this is Fate, but it draws on, the 1990s BBC Merlin miniseries or something, the things we're always doing. It doesn't draw on any of those things. It draws on the anthropology of stateless people, which, if you're not interested in, maybe this isn't the game for you. However, if you are that sounds interesting, I haven't read the books, you would probably still enjoy reading this role-playing game.
One of the criticisms, especially of Dungeons and Dragons, but of most RPGs that has been emerging in recent years, that I go back and forth on, but I think is valid, is that they are all rooted in sort of a acquisitive, extractive, exploitative, maybe imperialist, colonialist mindset, right? A lot of them are rooted in going and killing something and getting loot. That is the gameplay loop that feeds a lot of games, even if they are not explicitly, endorsing or supporting or celebrating that action. And there are a lot of people who are saying, why can't we have more games that are not rooted in this explicitly Western extractive mindset? And some games attempt that, but often have the same mechanical roots. Zephyr,
right? They're a critique from the inside.
Yeah.
Your character is in debt to a capitalist system,
right,
and you hate it, and you're trying to get out, but it's still about that system. And this is really not about that.
Zephyr's gameplay and storytelling and function is fundamentally built from a different foundation. And I think that's really cool and interesting. Whether or not it is fun remains to be seen. And Matt and I will talk about it. I have opinions that I'll save for the end, but I think this is a really, really bold idea because it's really hard to do, right? It's really hard to make a clean break from like the history of, all heretofore created RPGs. And sometimes it's not a good idea to do that because you are asking a lot of your players. But this is a very bold attempt to say, what if we played an entirely different type of game that is still like a TTRPG?
Okay, then let's get back to our anthropology about stateless people,
Yes.
right? And I'm drawing here on David Graeber, I forget his co-authors' names, The Dawn of Everything, James Wingrove, James C. Scott's Seeing Like a State, a really great recent book of his, Against the Grain, about agriculture. And, so these authors, they're writing kind of these secondary books where they're taking a lot of other anthropologists' works and combining them. But it's really, really fascinating. And if you're not, let's say, an anthropologist or like some kind of social scientist or something, you'll still enjoy reading these books. And they go into a lot of the ways that people outside of state hierarchies see the world.
I think Graeber's books especially are very accessible, even if you're not like an academic. And Debt, the first 5,000 years, is one of those books that fundamentally changed my worldview forever. I've been waiting for somebody to explain to me why it's wrong or present like a valid critique of what Graeber lays out in it, and I have yet to encounter it, which has been a real mindfuck. Like we're talking about several thousand pages of anthropological research cited in this introductory paragraph. But I think Debt is a really good one for understanding what's happening in this game, because one of the things that Graeber points out, one of the fundamental things he's trying to do with Debt the first 5,000 years is, one, he's challenging. Matt, I don't know if this is true of you, but American students especially are taught that the origins of sort of like the modern economy or capital is in sort of like a primitive barter system, right?
Yeah.
Like you would go and you had eggs and you would take it to your local cobbler and you would trade them eggs for fixing your boot or something like that, right? And Graeber points out that this is ridiculous. That this is not how any like early modern economy has ever worked. That would not like function in any meaningful way. And he points out that most of them worked on some sort of debt or obligation system, right? And varying degrees of, like they're codified in certain ways. Sometimes it's a loose set of obligations. Sometimes it's a very like strict set of obligations marked on things like sticks or with stones and things like that. And that this is what our modern economy and especially our currency systems emerged out of.
This is a broad generalization, but I think the example he gives is that, in a very small community, I say to you, Rob, like, hey, that's a really nice pair of shoes that you made. And you, being my friend and community member and neighbor, would just give me one. That's like expected of you. And then, either formally or informally, there would be a tally. And then, I would have to go like pirate some DVDs for you later next year.
Right. I mean, and this is not just something that he's just like making up. There's tons of historical and anthropological research that he marshals to make this point. And what seems to be true is that in like most pre-modern, early modern societies, people just sort of like either everyone knew, right, that Matt gave me some nice shoes and, he owes me, right? And it would be expected at some point, that obligation would be returned. Not in like that wouldn't be forced. It would just be sort of like a social expectation most of the time, right? And there's a whole lot of like fuzziness to this because that's kind of how human social relations work. Like it's not, exactly set in stone. It's not always codified by laws. You have obligations to other human beings based on your relationships to them and your relationships with them, which the more time that has passed, the more I think about it, the more it seems inscrutably correct. But that's one of the sort of like key assumptions of the world that Zephyr is taking place in, is this idea of obligations.
An idea of obligation, a breaking down of the distinction between the human and the natural. We're not seeing these as like the hard lines we do in modern society, right? Man versus nature, man versus God. Like, these are not broken down anyway. And so this game is an attempt to create a world, at least from my perspective, that doesn't have those distinctions. And it's also in dialogue with a lot of research on the emergence of like, hey, how do we, at least in certain places and certain times, get away from this anarchist way of living life? How did, and this is where I think James C. Scott's Against the Grain comes
away
in.
from a capitalist way towards, you said anarchist.
Okay, yeah. Sorry. From an anarchist way into a state society.
Oh, right. Sorry. I misunderstood. You were right. You were right. Yeah. How do we move from this to a capitalist state? How do we become a stated people instead of a bunch of stateless people?
Right. And I think there's some compelling arguments is that a state is just like, a crazy protection racket that was able to graft itself on to some early horticultural economies throughout the world. And like people tried to get away and leave those that hierarchy because it's unpleasant to be in. But state, one of the technologies of the state was being able to mobilize violence in new ways, and that kind of got people stuck. It didn't actually mean that most people for a long time lived under states, and maybe it meant that the people on the periphery of states had not only like the benefit of living a more anarchist way of life, hunting, foraging, raising livestock, but then they could also go and get extra stuff from the state whenever they wanted to, because actually keeping all your like stuff around in big piles tends to attract people. That part of the argument doesn't really come up that much in this book, but it's also engaging with that history, because in this world, not only do we have a living continent and people who are a part of that living continent, the wind folk, we also have people who are kind of living a more modern, stated way of living with debt and serfs and farming, all that stuff.
More advanced technologies of mostly of extraction and violence. Look,
well, I think the author would say maybe not more advanced, but more violent.
That's a great point. More violent. Well, and this brings me to a point, like, a lot of what we're going to say about this sounds like, and I mean this in the nicest possible way, hippie shit. And I often find myself, as I'm reading like Graeber's stuff and Scott's stuff, being like, what is this fucking, pinko hippie bullshit? But like, I also think that's, I don't know, like a reaction that's been beaten into me, because a lot of it is very like, it's very smart, it's very well researched, and it's a very like keen understanding of the world we live in and like human relations. When you say something like humans are not separate from the earth, we exist with it and in relationship to it and are made out of it and return to it. That sounds like something that you would hear Pocahontas say in a Disney movie, but it's also true. It's also like when you think about
undeniably true. It's
undeniably true. And in the same way, a lot of these things sound like, what you kind of a little ridiculous, but they are very much true. And I think, this is a very interesting way to access those ideas and interact with them. The world of Zephyr makes explicit, right? Like the Windfolk, which you play, are actually made out of the same like feelings breathed out from Ophoi, of which Ophoi is constructed. So I know
TTRPGs authors who use subtext, and they're all cowards. No, in the text, you are made of the world. Like to make your character, someone in your community put up a little, essentially scarecrow with a shard of a dead zombified king that was ritually made by your community, and then the world breathed life into it.
Yeah, and I don't have any problem with this. Do away with subtext. Let your players explore other subtleties, but be explicit with like what you what you're trying to say. And yeah, anything else we want to say about, I mean, there's a million things that we could say about the ideas at the core of this, but maybe we should jump into the like actual mechanics and play of Zephyr now that we've kind of explained like what's going on here.
I just, to put a button on it, I think I will say I have a hard time judging and critiquing this RPG because, as we said, like, Graeber and Scott are like extremely my shit, Yeah. These are books I've not in my research interests at all, but I have read for fun because they're just really fascinating. I think it's up in the air for me whether like players who are not familiar with these works will enjoy this game. I think they probably will. But the overlap of friends that I have, two, one of which is you, who are like familiar with this work, and overlap of friends who really want to play like a story heavy game about like intense feelings. I don't know how much overlap there is there. So that's just a warning. It's not a critique. It's just that's the niche of this game.
Yeah. And not to be annoying about it, but like everything, but like every game is like ideological in some way. And sometimes they're really like explicitly ideological. There are people we've had on and games we've reviewed that are like really trying to say something, and that's okay. Like that's totally fine. Sometimes that can get in the way of like, is this a fun game? I do not think that Zephyr suffers from like trying to say something. I think a game is at the heart of this TTRPG. Like I think that Federico was like, what would be fun to play, and built it around this idea. I don't think that, this is not a lecture packaged in a, glossy TTRPG book. Like it's a game. Whether or not it's the game for you, like Matt said, is an open question, but I definitely think it has some appeal. We'll talk about the limitations at the end, but I do think that this is fun and not just like, I don't know, like an object lesson or, some kind of like avant-garde way of sneaking, anarchist ideas into the mainstream discourse. But yeah.
Yeah, we're poisoning the minds of the youth with James C. Scott's radical things about peasants in the uplands of Indochina.
Sorry.
So
one last.
mechanics,
I'm going to put my button on this before I. Why?
Actually,
why?
No buttons, Rob. Thread. We're tying these together with patterns.
Thread woven from. Yeah,
it's a secret tool. We'll use it later.
That's right. Is one of the things that I love about Graeber and Scott and really everyone who's writing in this tradition is that I think they're fundamentally optimistic about humanity. And I think that they look back and instead of seeing, nasty, brutish, and short, right? They're seeing cooperative, collaborative, communities of deep storytelling and interest and creativity. And I really love that. I think that's true and correct. I am fundamentally an optimistic about humanity, which is why I really like these things, which is why I really like this game. Okay, that's my button on this.
No, that's a good button. Mechanics.
Sorry, no buttons. Buttons are a tool of the hierarchy. We are against them.
Of the salt states.
The salt states.
All right, so before we get to our discourse on salt and iron, let's talk about the mechanics. So there's no dice in this game. Instead, there are beads.
Beads, yes. There's
bees.
Beads.
We're all about getting that honey, Bear.
Little colorful tokens. Probably little
colorful
glass
tokens
beads is how you would do it. But you could do anything, little discs. But they are arranged into 4 colors: cyan, magenta, yellow, and black.
Yeah. And so everything in this game is either a combination of these tokens, which kind of sit in a little pool on your character sheet. And if you ever need, I think this is a really fun way of doing things. If you ever need to do a check, I think is the way you would term it in a different RPG, where you need to, hey, there's a chance you succeed or fail. You essentially have a reveal. You gather up a number of tokens in your hand. The narrator, the GM, does the same, and you reveal them and compare them. And depending on the difficulty of the check, there's a range of tokens. So like I think a normal check is 1 to 3 tokens that each the GM and players put in their hands. And if there's a tie, the narrator wins. If there's not a tie, then the player wins. And you can adjust the number of tokens revealed and whether it's a tie or not a tie for a success to basically make a nice curve of probabilities. And to me, this is such an interactive way of doing a check with another person. It's dramatic. You can kind of wait and choose to open your hand as you're narrating the consequences. It's really fun, and it still gives you probabilities, and it gets completely away from dice, which is super cool.
We've talked about, Matt and I, we love pools. I love little tokens. I like the idea of having all these little like glass beads. I like having something visual to work with. This, after having read through it and noodled on it, this now makes sense to me, but I will admit that this was hard for me to wrap my head around. And Matt, you're better at math and probabilities than I am, so maybe this was easier for you. But like as an example, right, an easy reveal means you and the narrator, the GM, choose between 1 and 5.
4.
Very easy. 1 and 5.
1 and 5, yes.
1 and 5 tokens, right? In my mind, I am understanding that means that there is a greater chance of you succeeding. But unlike when I am picturing in my mind the outcomes of rolling like a 3d6 or a d20, I am struggling immensely with understand. Like it doesn't naturally, the probabilities don't reveal themselves to me in the same way.
From very easy to unthinkable, I believe the probabilities go from 80% chance of success, 75, 66, 50, 33, and 25% of chance of success, which is, listen, if we're talking about like when we actually want to roll, that's pretty much the range we want.
Yeah. It works perfectly.
There's no dice. Yeah.
The probabilities map very similarly to a lot of the dice systems that we use, and it's fun. It's a very simple like bidding game, except you're bidding in secret and you do a dramatic reveal. And
I expect to see this system again.
I've actually encountered in a game that a friend of mine is working on, a similar type of system based around tokens. I think this is a really cool idea, and there's a lot of different ways you can go with this. One of the cool things about this one is you've got these 4 colors, and your Zephyr, your Windfolk, is made up of these colors. And when you are revealing things, you can choose which of them to use, and there are different interactions based on what you choose. There are different interactions based on like what you have in your your feelings pool. The core mechanic, the reveal, is actually very, very simple, but there's a lot of things around it that complicate and make it interesting. I think it's a really, really cool system, and this is the only thing you have to know mechanically, right? That all checks are reveals, and they're all some version of this, which I think is really great. And we can't talk about the reveal without talking about the rest of the mechanics. So this is a narrative-heavy game about your little masked windfolk people, wandering around the continent, fulfilling their obligations, hunting, gathering, cooking, creating feelings and bonds with nature, maybe dramatically running away or confronting some people who are not great from the salt states who might want to do them harm, dealing with obstacles of nature and beasts and things like that. But this, despite its narrativeness, and as Rob said earlier, this is hippie shit. This is an incredibly detailed and complex set of systems, because in addition to just this simple reveal mechanic, every character based on their clan has a different approach to what are the main 6 emotions of the game, which have a different unique combination of these multicolored tokens. You have your total pool, your constitution, which if you lose all of it, you dissolve into nothing. You will also your character is driven by their obligations. There are obligations like can create bonds, which can give you more power. Your obligations, the amount of obligations you have determines the number of technologies your character has, which is cool things that they can do.
Each of your characters has a bunch of different traits at character creation. Session 0 here is a must. I think it's probably will take you 3 or 4 hours to get through. You also have like stuff that you've built or own that has like its own load. There's specific rules for farming, gathering, hunting, cooking, and gliding around on little Avatar The Last Airbender fans. It's, there are different stats for different types of bows in this game.
Yeah.
It's a very, very detailed game.
There's a lot of different things that you can do and a lot of different ways that you could approach this. But I think one of the things that the gameplay encourages and that the authors are trying to push you toward is about survival, is about your relationship to the natural world. You very explicitly get your feelings back, your little colored tokens, mostly by eating, by things you gathered or prey that you hunted. Sometimes
eat your feelings, Rob.
Eat your feelings. Sometimes by experiencing something delightful like a pleasant hot spring or a particularly restorative wind. But a lot of the game, if you're doing anything that requires exertion, anything challenging, you'll use your tokens, and so you'll need to hunt and cook and prepare food. And there are really like neat rules for hunting and gathering, and depending on your clan and your technologies and your traits, you're good at some and not so good at others. And you will probably, depending on your narrator and depending on how the game goes, spend a lot of time doing that kind of thing, which to some people is fun and I like the rules. It seems like it would be fun, but you are not going to be doing, or you will, if you play the game as written, it'll be a lot of, just trying to stay alive, trying to exist in nature, trying to explore and wander and find tasty and useful things and
fulfill your obligations. Essentially, you're going to, after creating your characters and coming up with your origins and personalities and obligations, the game is essentially asking you to take one of the 5 beautifully illustrated maps, plunk them on the table, say, where are we? Okay, where do you want to go? And then, use the tables of weird obstacles and weird creatures and put those in the path of your characters, right? It's very much a explore the world type of game, of course, until it isn't, until something really bad happens.
Let's talk about obligations in specific for a moment, because there's a few different systems. There's bonds and feelings, like Matt said. There's entwining, which is interesting. There's fetishes and patterns, but obligations is one of the key drivers of your character and the game. And obligations are linked to this idea of Ophoi, which is a number, right? It is sort of like a quantifiable amount. But you're basically anything that you would do, any trade that you would make, any resource that you would acquire, especially any technology or tool, is going to come with a kind of obligation or an Ophoi. And one of the interesting things about this is, there's rules for determining how much any given obligation should cost in Ophoi, but then you're encouraged to consider that it would cost 1 more or 1 less than what you actually came up with, because this is how sort of obligations work in Windfolk society. It wouldn't be done to precisely charge somebody a certain amount for exactly. That's not how we're doing things here in our beautiful anarchist Windfolk society. Your character will, as throughout character creation, based on the things that you will have an obligation to a single person or to a clan or to
a place,
to a, you could have an obligation to a herd of wildebeests, depending on how things turn out. You have all of these things that are written down and known to you and sometimes quantified in the form of a fetish or Ophoi. And these are important drivers of the game. These are the things that you are going to be trying to fulfill your obligations, right?
Now, here's, I think, my main criticism of this game. which is that it has all these beautiful interlocking systems at which obligations intersect with most of them, like mechanically, like how you spend your tokens, how you grow your character, etc. Narratively, it is suggested that's like obligations should drive play. You're a group of winfolk, you're going around, you're finding where your obligations are and in some way trying to fulfill them. A lot of the other parts of the game, the traits, the clans, the technologies are all like really filled out for you. And obligations are just like kind of a blank space. There's, I think, one example given. And then, of course, you could go look at the pre-generated characters for some more examples. But that's like not really in the player part of the book. So my initial thought reading this was like, this will be a lot of fun to create these, little magical winfolk characters with these cool wooden masks. And I think when we get to the obligation part, I feel like my players in this completely alien world, not only because it's about a stateless society and all my players are from states, but it's fantastical in ways that are hard to describe in like an easy shorthand, going to have a hard time writing the outline of an obligation. And the responsibility is kind of on them to come up with what their obligations that are driving their characters are.
Yeah, I think that's right. And a lot of the stuff in this book is, I don't know, it's big brain stuff, right? But it's pretty well explained and made accessible. The obligations they make sense to me. Like Matt said, he and I are probably the precise target demographic for this book, having read a lot of the foundational material. I don't know that it's going to make sense to the average player, and you can use the pre-generated characters to get a good idea of like what an obligation should look like. But I do think that this is going to be the hardest part of character creation, is coming up with good, compelling, realistic within the fiction obligations. This is genuinely, like Matt said, kind of definitely like a stumbling point.
Right, because you kind of need to know and have already fully grasped how this world works to write your obligation. And I don't know if this is an easy problem to solve, but like I felt like a table of like, this for that at here and because of this would make sense. And you can always reference other parts of your character sheet. I think I'll say I could create a great obligation for my character if I was playing in the game run by the author of this book. I'd have no problem doing it.
Yeah. Same. Yeah. It is, I don't think it's like insurmountable, but because they're so important to the game and to the game session itself, it is, I would have also liked maybe a few more examples or maybe even a table. It's weird because or maybe it's not weird, I don't know. Many parts of this game are meticulously detailed, and there are subsystems for all kinds of stuff, really like good and thorough ones. But obligations is a little thin. Yeah, I feel like there could have been more there.
Right. Yeah. There's all these, systems for what the weather is and how to change it and how to what I like about this system.
How to glide, how to hunt, how to farm, wind. Yeah.
Right. There's no distinction between like magically affecting your environment, being a person, nature, and the technologies and like stuff you possess. It's all the same thing, right? Which I think is a really cool way of looking at a fantasy world, right? Essentially, some parts of the game, your character is doing magic through feelings, but it's not described that way. And that's so cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, but again, the core of the game is people fulfilling these obligations, and I don't know with the game as written, I could help characters come up with interesting ones. I think what I would do is write down 20 and put them out on note cards on the table and let players just pick one.
I think that would work. I mean, they don't have to be They can be personalized, but you could
And they don't
pick
have to be super detailed.
Yeah, you
but
could
they're
pick
so
from like,
important.
an old hunter of the earthen folk helped me learn how to do this. And, or I was sick and this village of rot barks helped me do whatever. Like, you could come up with like a 20 note cards with like some pretty simple obligations on them. This is fixable, but this is supposed to be player driven, and that is going to, lots of this are going to be hard for players because it's just so different. I feel like the main problem
Can we talk
here
about that for a second?
Is not that like this is not, I think, more complicated than the average TTRPG. It is just so different.
Not.
And I feel kind of bad because like it suffers because it's just so different. If we were, naked babes encountering a TTRPG for the first time, this would not be harder for us to learn than D&D 5th edition. But it is a totally different paradigm. And that I think is going to be a real challenge for running this and introducing it to players.
Right. I think the interesting thing about this game, and, I wouldn't even give it a second thought other than the art is so like amazing, right? You've got, I don't know if we're doing a great job of describing it, but like these almost hobbit-looking people covered in wraps, wearing these wooden masks with glowing eyes, and they all have cool scarves and bows and spears and fetishes representing their obligations hanging around their necks, and these fantastical creatures that seem to be made out of like tangled roots and mushrooms and stuff like that, and horrifying looking salt people in terrible salt mines. All of this looks so cool, but like your person is not like a human being. They're like made out of condensed feelings, and they make other people, but they also get hungry, but those feelings are also hunger, and they can cook curry, but it's also feelings. And like the world is so different in this game. Like, would my character have a sibling? I guess you could just say yes. I don't know. Like, are the salt people, I thought at first they were human beings and we were the magical creatures, and the salt folk were just like regular humans. But no, they're not. They're also made out of this condensed raw emotion of the continent in a different way. And I get the appeal of doing it like this, right? Because we are trying to break from the baggage of how we understand, like, what if the mystical non-stateless people are magic creatures and everyone else is just regular humans? That would not be good. But the sheer difference of everything, it makes it harder for me to grapple with, if that makes sense.
Yes. The other game that I've encountered like this, which is also one of my favorites, but very challenging to explain and run, is Invisible Sun. And Invisible Sun starts from like a pretty like radically different foundation and understanding of the world and who the characters are. I also think it's a very good RPG, and it is just, this is hard. This is a real challenge for designers trying to do something different, because we come to these games with a set of assumptions. One of those assumptions, believe it or not, is like, can I play as a human? Right? Like, it does not matter like what type of game you're playing. I think a lot of people come to the table expecting to be able to play as a human being, even if, it's the rest of the world is radically different. And that alone is kind of a big ask, as it turns out.
It's a big ask because I think in order to make a character that is interesting, you have to read a lot of this book, right?
Yes, yeah.
One of the things I'm always wary about, at least for me and my table, is playing a game where I expect the players to read the book as opposed to having me just explain it to them. I'll always have players who will read the whole book, but they are always in the minority.
Yeah.
And this one, you'd really, and because you can't just say, well, this this is an old-timey Western set in space this time, right? You can't just, and then everyone gets what's going on, right? This is a superhero show, but it's gritty and real. People get punched in half. They don't know, there's nothing where you can just say, this is X, right? Because if you listen to the beginning of this episode, you notice Rob and I struggling to give a one paragraph encompassing description of the game.
Yeah, there are things that we can say this is kind of, in some ways, a little, forgive me for the term, Ghibli-esque. If you did want to play games set in the wonderful, weird, natural world of Princess Mononoke or Spirited Away or something like that. There are elements of that in this, and you can see some of the inspirations, but it's not really like anything else, right? It's really I recognize a lot of the game design roots and a lot of the narrative roots of this, but they have been taken in a radical direction, right? Knowing the origins of some of these things does not mean that this is not totally new and unfamiliar.
One other thing I wanted to talk about, if we're ready to move on from this section, is the salt states. Kind of a scar in the middle of Ophoi, the wandering continent.
The salt states are really interesting, and they're at the core of the game, right? Your Windfolk are explicitly in conflict with the salt states, and again, as enjoyers of books like The Dawn of Everything and seeing a state, the explicit conflation of a state, of a hierarchical polity and violence and evil and exploitation is, to me, delightful. It's very fun, and there's a lot of really clever stuff here. These are the only people who practice agriculture in a large way. They grow grain, but you can't get all of your four feelings from grain. You can't get fully nourished. So all of the people in the salt states are in a state of sort of starvation or malnutrition, which is actually
feelings-wise,
accurate to when you look at really early agricultural societies, as they were much less healthy than the hunter-gatherers that they had moved on from, but they can make swords and things. And like Matt said, we know TTRPG writers who use subtext, and they are cowards. I like the salt states a lot.
They've got salt mines, salt, salary. It's association with currency. The people there are born into debt, and it's a different kind of debt than your obligation in that it requires coercive violence in terms of grueling labor, right, in order to get out of. You have to create other people. You have to get a debt contract to give them a name in order for you to move up. And contrasting with the hunting, foraging, and horticulture of your people, which is not seen as work. It's hey, this is where you want to hung the jerk that invented work. And they also have guns and swords. And if your character is ever unfortunate enough to actually interact with them, the mechanics for using those break the game. Literally, your character sheet will become broken as you are dropping tokens on it and punching holes where those tokens land to represent that part of your character is now destroyed. And your characters will read about this, or if they interact it, they will want to raid these people and in some way disrupt how they're living because it's so different than the way you live.
Well, and this is why I think it's important. Like Matt, I thought that the salt states were a different species, a different creature at the beginning, but I actually think it's important that they are also Windfolk. And there's sort of
they're not wind folk, but they are folk. There's one thing that isn't really explained. There's several mentions of water folk and swamp folk. There's not a clear definition given in this.
It's implied that there are other types of feeling constructs. Not everybody is a wind folk like you, but they are folk, right? And they wear masks, and they are like your players. And there's this sort of cruel thing at the center of their society, which is they're all working towards the universal jubilee, right? Once
The 4-step ladder, Rob. We're almost there.
That's right. Once all of society is united under a single ruler, that ruler will be able to forgive
globalism, Rob. It's globalism.
forgive all debts, right? So many of these salt staters are trying, to do the right thing, trying to bring everyone under their lord's aegis so they can all be free. But no lord is going to willingly give up their power, so they are all constantly locked in battle with each other. Feel free to draw whatever conclusions you'd like to draw from this conception of a state. But I think it's important that these are not uniquely awful, evil beings, right? Your players are not. This is not a game about inflicting wanton violence. There are a lot of great games about that, but this is not one of them, right? When you hunt, your players are encouraged to, be considerate of the things they hunt. You have to do, if you don't want to be, don't want to suffer the consequences, you need to do a shedding. You need to, essentially shed blood after you have killed to show that you take it seriously. And in the same way, you're going to be in conflict with these salt staters, and they are mean and they have big guns, but they are like you, and they are perhaps just misguided. So your players may instead want to liberate or convince, the people who come after them. But one cool bit about this is probably the most terrifying foe that your players will encounter is a hero. A hero of the salt states.
Ugh, don't like it. Scary.
Somebody who carries a sword and, heroically charges off into the wilderness to make safe the dark places of the world, who protects the salt staters from the nasty other outside. And yeah, these are incredibly powerful and dangerous foes who you are encouraged to run away from and definitely not fight.
This part of the game was incredibly fascinating to me, and I absolutely loved it mechanically and, of course, in the lore. And it brings me, I guess, to the last part of the game, which is what kind of game should you run here? And the author here, Federico, gives us clear advice. He's like, I like to play games specifically with my friends and specifically over a very long period of time. And I think that is absolutely the case for this game. I would never run a one-shot with this system because it's so much about character, not exactly growth, right? Because that's a salt state concept, but change over time and gaining and losing obligations in a never-ending pattern, right? Which on the beautiful character sheets you see illustrated, and you actually draw, threads that show this happening. The character sheets are a work of art, by the way.
They are. They're really fascinating, yeah.
Because I think this would be a game that would be best played over 10, 15, 20 sessions. I really enjoyed looking at this game. I enjoyed and sometimes struggled with reading this book. I don't think I will ever play this game. However, I'm so glad I read it. I will be thinking about it for a long time.
Yeah, I really liked this section on running the game, and the way that Federico describes it is very appealing to me, right? So it would go something like you roll, or you start the game and you determine where you are on Ophoi, and your players look at their sheets and they say, oh, I'm a little short on, cyan tokens or something, we need to hunt or we need to gather. And then you've done that. And then you're like, oh, well, we're right here. And I have an obligation to a village that's in the cyan plaque, which we're not too close to, so we really ought to go to that. And you can kind of see how gameplay would just sort of emerge organically from just, this is what's on my character sheet. This is what we've been doing. And that's very appealing to me. Whether or not that would actually work for most groups is definitely questionable, but I can see in my mind how you could just sit down and just the session would just sort of unfold from what needs to be done, and that would be really fun to do, and also be really fun to be the GM for, because you wouldn't be doing so much driving. You're doing interjections, you're explaining, you're providing context, but the players know what to do because it's all right there.
Right. They have all these abilities to move around, to hunt, to cook, to glide, to change the weather. And in a way, you're just responding and kind of seeing what happens. I really like that. I think I have like one other big thought at the end of this game, and I don't know where to place it.
Well, let me. One more thing.
Let's talk more about running the game.
No. I mean, that's basically it. And this section is short, but I think actually like very useful. We often say that we want a RPG to come with a sample adventure. This does not. I'm not going to ding it for it though, because it
would be impossible to write.
Yeah, it couldn't be done, and Federico has explained it and given us a pretty good section on how he runs the game. And, I think we should listen to him because clearly, this isn't something that came up without obvious substantial playtesting. So I trust Federico's judgment on this. I was in Matt's shoes until the very end. I was like, this is really interesting. I don't really know if this is for me. I can't see myself running this. I still don't know when I would ever run this, but when I got to the end, I was like, you know what? I actually think I would really like to play this game. I think I actually would run this. I don't know if I have a group in mind. I don't know like when that would happen, but I definitely could. I think this would be fun. I guess it's sort of like the thing that I came to at the end. And I'm sort of like, because we read a lot of things that are just like not for me that I really enjoyed reading and I think are great games, but I'm probably never going to run. We talked about Draw Steel, which I think is a great game and really cool.
Yeah.
I don't think I really want to run Draw Steel, but I do kind of want to run Zephyr, because, and this is the thing that I wasn't sure about, right?
I want to run this.
Yeah. I knew I would like this. I knew I would be interested, and I love reading RPGs even if I'm not going to run them because I get a lot of ideas. I think it's interesting. I like to think about mechanics and settings. But at the end, and longtime listeners will know I'm always banging on about this. I want to have fun, right? I want it to be a good game, right? And my idea of like what's fun to play isn't like narrowing, but it is getting a lot more like specific. And I didn't think it was this, but I actually do think this would be fun to play. So I'm sort of like holding out for a future opportunity to put this into practice because I think Federico is correct. You want to play this slowly, deliberately, and consistently with a group of people that is okay taking it slow and exploring in-game and out-of-game feelings. And sorry, we've said feelings a lot. And I don't want to make it this isn't like, it isn't necessarily like, like a therapy session game. Like when we say feelings, it's just like, it's more thoughtful and introspective, and you're engaging with your PC's emotional states and the world around them because they're all driven by emotions more so than in other games. But it is still going to require some a thoughtful group, I guess, to do well.
Yeah, I think you have to look at the tagline to understand the feelings. Like when I read all the mechanics, I'm like, wow, feelings are very important, right? But the tagline is identities, right? Mm-hmm. The feelings are more definitions about your relationships with different things, right?
Right.
You have a specific set of colors for rage or sorrow or love, and these define your relationships or bonds with other things. This is not a game about you, the player, having feelings.
Right.
You will have no more or less feelings than playing any other TTRPG, and I think that confused me a little bit. I'm like,
yes.
Oh, what are the mechanics here that are supposed to... It's not about that. It's the feelings are a way of defining relationships to the world. And once I understood that, it made a little bit more sense to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about your big picture. Let's
Yeah, I mean, my two big picture things are, the feelings I think can be misunderstood, and I think I explained that as best as I'm able. And the other big picture thing is people like survival style video games and other type of stories a lot, right? People like games like Minecraft or Terraria or something like that. Valheim was a big hit a couple years ago. And by big hit, more people played it than most other indie RPG or games. But those games are often, just about, hey, you've got a place and you're going to build it and you're going to build some walls and you're going to harvest some things and bring them back and you will kind of despoil these other regions. But if you wanted to play a crafting survival TTRPG that wasn't about that, how would it look? And I think it would look like this. And I think it's fundamentally more interesting than, some sort of crafting survival TTRPG where you're building a base and going out and doing things just because it's so different.
Yeah, we talked about the dungeon gameplay loop earlier. You go, you fight monsters, you get loot, you get stronger, you fight stronger monsters. That, by the way, I'm not actually criticizing that. I love number go up. I love number go up so much. I am no better than anybody else who likes a game where you a video game or a TTRPG where you go, you fight things, you get stronger. I'm not, I'll spend my whole life examining the origins of that feeling, but I'm not going to pretend like I don't like number go up. But a very satisfying gameplay loop is also just you exist in the world, you travel around, you find new things, you hunt and cook and restore lost health, and you go and you find and explore and, new things.
Your character evolves and changes what they are and who they are and why they exist.
I mean, it's slower paced. It's less, it's less extractive, less acquisitive. But I think that's, I think it would be wrong to describe this as a cozy game because it's not cozy, but it could potentially be slower paced and less, less intense in terms of you're not necessarily going to be in a life or death combat every single time. You may be swinging from vines or traveling across dangerous cliffs or encountering, beasts that are a little bit hostile, but not every time are you going to be in a potentially life-defining situation. You're just going to be existing in the world. But I think the way that the gameplay makes that work is very compelling. I think it would be a lot of fun to just today my friend Ophoi is hungry, so we're going to make sure that Ophoi is fed, and this village is needs a new bow because their hunters broke, so we're going to help them make a new one. That's, I don't know, that could be really fun, I think.
The last thing I'll say to recommend this one is if you're looking for either mechanically or with the world building, a system that is a radical break from what you've been reading or playing or looking at, this offers both of those. The token chit system and moving those around, changing them, defining them, bidding them for reveals is super fascinating to me. And to look at a fantasy world that has much fewer touchstones, than this is, Roman era Earth, but with magic, is such a radical break from that. If you wanted to look at something like that, right? If you were interested in the cozy game about cooking and exploring, but were dissatisfied with a game that's well, this is Studio Ghibli mashed with Zelda using the 5e mechanics. If you're well, that's actually not what I was looking for. If you're looking for something that's so radically different, give this a read.
Yeah, I guess the last thing I'll say, and I think that we've made this clear, sometimes we read things that are really out there and that we enjoy and maybe even recommend, but mostly from a perspective of curiosity, or you could borrow or adapt this. I want to make clear that this is a full, in my opinion, very well designed, playable game that I think has a lot to recommend it. The problem at the core of Zephyr, if there is one, is that Federico did something very bold, I think, and just said, what if the whole foundation of tabletop role-playing games was something different? And that is going to be difficult for most people to overcome. If you can adopt you can have a beginner's mind, right? If you just, come at this, completely fresh, I think that this is no more difficult than any of the other RPGs that we recommend. It's going to be hard if you are used to really like any of the other major paradigms. So if any of what we said sounds interesting, I really think you should check it out because I think it's a really fun game, and I think it's like really well designed and would be fun to play. And also, it is really kind of like a masterpiece of writing and design. It is really like...
This is an example of like what one creative person can do if they have a lot of time and ability to both draw, do layout and rules writing and world building all at the same time. So,
yes.
We very rarely do we look at games where the person who has written the text has also done the art, and it's super cool when we do.
Yeah.
Link in the show notes to Zephyr if you want to check it out. Like I said, I will be thinking about this forever, and I will be almost certainly buying the next game that Sans makes.
This is really something. If you have questions or thoughts about what we've said, other things that you want us to review, it might even have been one of you that recommended that I back this. I don't know. I literally cannot remember.
You should remember, Rob, this is part of your obligations to the community. And by listening to our advice and reviews, you have an obligation to us. Possibly it would be nice if you sent us a letter at dmofnone@gmail.com, or if you followed us on social media.
We have a Discord. I should make this clear because I think it's not. The Discord itself is free to anybody. Anybody can join and talk. There is a special secret channel only for Patreons, but the Discord itself is open to everyone. We have lots of channels, and it's lots of people talking all the time. Good place to ask questions of them and of us. So come check it out.
Thanks for listening, everyone.
Thanks for listening, and keep rolling them colored glass baubles.
Right. Randomly choosing.
Yeah.
Glass beads, Rob.
Keep randomly choosing those glass beads.
Hello, what's your name? Where you been all my life? Just playing, just saying. We should probably get a couple more drinks and we can write our names up on a link and tape it up on the wall. And if you get to catching feelings, baby, it ain't your fault. You can blame it on the salt sitting on the rim, blame it on the salt.